If you work on late medieval France, you cannot ignore the long shadow that Joan of Arc cast over the period. In fact, in modern times, Joan of Arc is often the only person people know of by name from that period. And when I talk to people, I often see that they are far less interested in the historical details of her life, but are very interested in what she represents for them. And I quickly discovered that this was not a modern phenomenon. Over the centuries, we see people time and again coming to Joan to use Joan to talk about themselves and to talk about society. And we see that as early as during her lifetime. I can give the example of a young Italian living in Bruges who writes to his father in Italy multiple letters telling him all of the details he's slowly learning about this young woman who amazes him so much. But it's not just then. I can see, for example, and I talk about the case of Voltaire, whose satire on Joan of Arc allows him to explore and to mock practices of his own time, whether he's challenging monarchy, talking about women's roles, or talking about the academic pursuit of creating France's first epic. I talk about Carl Dreyer's Passion of Joan of Arc, which pushes him to change his own aesthetics. And finally, I would evoke even Bernard Shaw, whose breakthrough in France is his work, Saint Joan. But that breakthrough comes because the actor and the director dramatically restaged the play to accommodate what the French would like to see and think about their newly canonized saint, Saint Joan of Arc. So that just kind of gives you an idea. I was very interested in the legacy and how that legacy has been used over time. I think Joan's lasting legacy is built on the fact that it is still difficult for us to wrap our mind around her story. It seems so out of the ordinary, so extraordinary. It's sad to say that just as it was the case in the Middle Ages, it's still difficult for us today to imagine a world in which a young woman um, of modest background could step forward, take leadership of a military, and change history. There are many today who, for example, don't believe women have the right to lead a country or to even be in the military. So her story from the Middle Ages continues to hold a mythic status today. There's also, of course, there's the religious side, there's the spiritual side, the mystery of Joan. There's the fact that she is really the ultimate tragic heroine. But I think it's also because so many artists and historians have kept her story alive over the centuries, and that each time, and well, in many cases, what they're trying to do is do justice to her story. They keep her alive because they believe her story still has many things to teach us. I tried to make this clear in the subtitle, The Life of a French Cultural Icon, because what I'm really interested in is more than the limited historical existence of Joan of Arc. I'm interested in the long, iconic presence that she has. And for this reason, I see her story beginning when she enters on the public stage at the age of around 17, but the story doesn't end when she's executed at the age of 19 or 20, but instead it continues for centuries thereafter. And to make this point, I return to early documents, contemporary documents. These can be propaganda pieces written during Joan of Arc's lifetime, diary entries, theological treatises, and even letters said to have been dictated by Joan. And I look at these documents to see the ways in which they are already shaping her into an icon, into a symbol that can represent many things and many competing things. And then I trace that into her afterlife. And that means beginning with the trial record itself, which disseminates after her execution, but also looking at historical works and especially creative works produced over the centuries. This transhistorical approach allows me to make two key points. The first point is that we need to return to the early material and recognize that when we read the trial record, for instance, we have direct citation of Joan, but we can't read this as direct entry into what Joan is thinking because it is curated. Her citations are curated, and we need to understand that that document and its authors are shaping the way we see her and what she represents. And then I continue that by looking especially at artists over time who use Joan to challenge themselves, their medium, to question the world around them, and also to question the way we look and use the past. So I hope that my readers will walk away from my text thinking, Joan of Arc lives. There were so many surprises and discoveries along the way of doing research for this book, but I think early on, one discovery that triggered my research was when I read about an intrepid Burgundian traveler who arrived in Constantinople in the early 1430s and reported that one of the first questions he was asked was about whether or not this girl, Joan of Arc, really existed and had she really been executed. I found that fascinating to appreciate how far her story had spread. Other surprises along the way was reading the testimonials from the what is often called the rehabilitation trial. Readers might not be aware of the fact that 25 years after her execution, there was a trial of the trial. And in reading those testimonials, I was really struck by how many people talked about her as a warrior. That was really a part of her story that it has repeatedly been erased over time. And it was moving to be reminded that in spite of all of the images we have of Joan as being very frail and frightened, that she was remembered by many as a very strong warrior. I think finally, I would have to mention the utter delight at the last moment in the final moments of working on this book when Joan of Arc, as far as I'm concerned, made a cameo appearance at the opening ceremonies of the summer 2024 Olympics in Paris. I'll leave it to my readers to discover that appearance in the closing of my book. I hope readers will walk away from my study with real appreciation for the historical sedimentation of Joan of Arc's legacy within French and Francophone culture. But I also hope that it will inspire a different type of engagement with that legacy. There's no shortage of histories and biographies about Joan of Arc. And there's no shortage of uh, studies that look at her legacy, that trace the legacy over time. But I hope my book provides a model for returning to especially artistic works, creative works, with a new way of looking at them. That is, instead of maybe focusing on are these historically accurate, or even focusing on how they may reflect the immediate time of the author. I hope that people will come back to the creative works on Joan of Arc and appreciate that she is a catalyst, that she is an icon that inspires new ways of thinking, of new ways of seeing the world, and that she can be a helpful medium, a helpful tool for us today to think through hard questions. In short, it comes back to the belief that I have, that I hope others will share with me, that Joan of Arc, the icon, is alive and well and merits our attention.